Resources for today will be added to our CAN webpage for our Spring ELO-P Academy, and so you all will have access to this. All right, and for folks that are just now joining us, welcome to our Spring 2025 ELO-P Academy. This workshop will be focusing on EXL 101 and education funding, how expanded learning fits into the education system. So if this is your first time joining us for one of our ELO-P academies, welcome. We're happy to have you. How the academy works is we have a specific workshop topic that we will focus on for the next 4 days. So today is day 1, and today's topic is what you see here. Tomorrow, we will be focusing on our strategic design and how you can learn more about that, get involved, get activated. And that will be tomorrow, same time, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then we'll resume our academies next Tuesday, April 22nd, where we'll be focusing on attendance recovery. And so a lot of great questions and insights about how folks can support attendance recovery within their communities. And then we'll wrap up our spring academies on Wednesday, day 4. And I recognize that there's another slide for that. And so we'll get there in a moment. We'll wrap up our academies on Friday, April 23rd, where we will have different divisions from the California Department of Ed leading a presentation on data collection efforts and how you can use that to support your funding and work in your community. So that is how our academies are offered. They're all recorded. Everything will be posted on our website, and everything will also be emailed to all of our registered participants. So for today, here's our agenda. In a few moments, I will pass it over to our facilitators, Heather and Tiffany from the California After School Network. And then we'll have some closing comments, and we will then transition to hear from a field spotlight. A field spotlight is an opportunity to hear from leaders throughout the field on promising practices in action, things that they would like to highlight that is working well in their ELO-P or in their ELO programs or within their communities and supporting the needs of children, youth, and families. And then if folks stick around, it's a great opportunity to engage in community building, networking, and diving a little deeper into the workshop content where you're invited to join a breakout room. And we'll provide a little more information about that later. But this is kind of the overview of the flow of our workshop for today. Shared learning spaces. So again, we hold our workshops as learning and collaborative spaces, and often we update materials in real time or immediately after a workshop, so that way you're receiving the most current information. And so we will share resources, contact info, and whatnot via a learning guide that we'll drop in the chat a little bit later. That will be a great place for you to take notes. It will also, towards the bottom of the pages, I think like on pages 3 and 4, there's additional resources that are shared to support you with ELO-P. And during our presentations, some of our presenters might not have the capacity to answer direct messages that are sent via the chat. And so if anyone needs support, Leslie Lugo, who facilitated our grounding, is here to support you all. If you have any questions, you can message Leslie, or you can just simply drop a message in the chat, and Leslie will do her best to support you all with that, along with Vanessa, who is also supporting our chat. And last thing, our presentation materials, we do our best to post the recording shortly after the workshop. So give us about 24 hours to have it up on our website along with the resources. If for some reason you don't get something, you can always send us an email and we'll do our best to get that over to you. So I mentioned earlier, here are our multi-day convenings of virtual workshops to support California ELO programs. You can see here the list of the workshops that I mentioned earlier. If you have not yet registered for day 2 through 4, you can scan this QR code and it will take you to our webpage where you can register for the upcoming workshops. And also, friendly reminder that our spring ELO-P office hours continue. We'll be connecting on Friday, April 25th for our next office hours session. And this is a great place if you have more of those detailed, nuanced, in the weeds questions that you would like some additional support on. You can certainly join us in office hours. The next one I mentioned is on Friday, April 25th at 12 p.m. And you can scan the QR code there to register for our ELO-P office hours. And of course, connect with us. This is a great way to join our CAN newsletter listserv so you can stay updated on all things ELO-P. Also, you can follow us on all of our social networks. And specifically, I recommend subscribing to our CAN YouTube channel because then you'll receive a notification when all of the updated content is posted and live on our YouTube page. So you certainly want to follow us and stay connected. And we'll share this throughout the presentation, but again, shout out to our SSEL System of Support for Expanded Learning. You can scan the QR code here or use the bit.ly. This is a whole community of folks that are here to support our field with all things expanded learning, ELO-P, ACEs, 21st century, right? There's regional teams, and so you can that's what the breakdown is here of this map. If this is the first time you're seeing this, we have 11 regions that we support throughout California, and so great network to stay connected to. And so I highly recommend bookmarking this webpage so that way you have the information that is needed when you need some support. And I'm just going to read this out loud. This is our pedagogical methodology. And so bear with me, read this out loud. We believe every child, youth, and the adults that live, love, and work with them deserve just and affirming spaces and opportunities that enrich, empower, enlighten, educate, and elevate them. We know learning happens in every context, and young people are assets in supporting their own learning and co-creating the solutions to the issues and challenges they face. Expanded learning and out of school time OST spaces can be cultivated by anchoring in some core beliefs and shared mindsets. And those are that we are rooted in love, and love is shown in our actions and our words. We are asset anchored and driven. We are aspirational in our mindsets, words, and actions. We are connected by our differences because that is what gives us strength and creates our collective. The appreciation of every culture, language, and lived experience is what we leverage to grow and nurture our collective spaces. We make decisions based on elevating the intrinsic gifts, talents, and wisdom of those closest to the problems we work collaboratively to solve. And we learn by doing, and we grow by reflecting on that learning. All right. Take a picture of that. It's pretty awesome. All right, so enough of my voice, and I think I'm 2 minutes over time here. Sorry, Heather and Tiff. I will be now introducing Tiffany Gibson, who's the director of our equity and quality team at the California After School Network, along with Heather Williams, the director of policy and outreach here at the California After School Network, who will be the incredible facilitators for the rest of our workshop today. And so I will pass it off to you both. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yes, thanks, Melissa, and thank you for, even though expanded learning pedagogical methodology is a mouthful, the words that are on that slide are always, no matter the content, a really great way to ground and start our conversation. So I appreciate you, Melissa, actually just reading each of those words and elevating those things into the space, reminding us of, even if we're talking about funding or other technical aspects, how do we really ground in our purpose of supporting our youth and our communities? So thanks for that. And we'll jump in just a few things about our workshop today, or session today. So high level, what we're covering, we're going to talk about expanded learning in California, very generally, expanded learning funding in California, some high level California education funding basics, and then kind of the intersection of expanded learning in the larger funding context. Those are topics that you could go very deep into. You could probably spend a really long time on each of these topics. We have an hour, less than an hour now, to cover all of that. So Tiffany and I are going to be having like more of a conversation, elevating some high level content, providing resources for you all to go deeper, hopefully spark conversations and reflection. Um, and of course, feel free to reach out if you're like, hey, I do want to go deeper into this particular topic. And we also have an entire system of support for expanded learning that was referenced that can help you with that. So on the next slide, you'll see just the learning structure. So definitely engage in the chat. Make sure you are sharing your ideas and thoughts, any resources or promising practices you have. This is a space of shared wisdom. So we really want to elevate everyone's voices. Again, Tiffany and I are going to kind of chat, but would love to have you all engage in the space. So that's where the richness of the conversation comes from, when you all are sharing what you are learning and exploring. We'll have pauses just for reflection questions, and then we do have breakouts at the end. And those breakouts are going to be loosely facilitated. That really is a space for you all to elevate what you're learning, what you're exploring. So there'll be CAN and ASAP staff in each of those spaces just to help like facilitate, host the space, but really that conversation will be driven by y'all. And then on the next slide, just last bit before we jump into the content. Oh, two more things. So just some things to think about while you're going through this. Just taking notes as we go through what stands out, what's inspiring. In particular, how does this impact how you think about your work and or your role? And so we'll be posing some reflection questions. And how does this impact how you are implementing your own expanded learning programs? And then now last piece before we jump into the content. So make sure, a lot of this, or office hours was already elevated by Melissa. That is a place to dig into the weeds of this content around expanded learning. The CDE FAQs have a lot of information. Those are revised regularly. So if you haven't looked at those in a while, might be time to go visit those. There is a CDE help desk also. So if you have technical questions that you need more follow-up on, engage with the system of support, regional teams, watch the fireside chats. Those have been kind of on hiatus, but will hopefully be coming back soon. So lots of additional resources. Again, we're not gonna cover everything in 50 minutes. So make sure you are accessing kind of all these other resources and opportunities. So now we'll jump into it. And I see a lot of people I recognize, so hopefully none of the next few slides are brand new, but just really want to ground in when we are talking about expanded in learning in California, what do we mean? And notice I said expanded learning and not ELO-P, so we are really like grounding in the overarching expanded learning framework. So the next couple slides, excuse me, important to note, right? Like even before COVID, California had the largest and one of the highest rated systems of school-based and school-linked expanded learning programs in the nation. And especially now, these programs exist in nearly every school district in the state. And they're really intended to offer supports to our students and families and their overall wellness. Pre-pandemic, we had ACES in 21st Century. We'll talk a little bit more about that. At that time, it was over 4,500 sites. All those little dots are site locations. And so now consider with the introduction of ELO-P, there are so many more dots on that screen. And our academy next week will talk about data collection so that we can actually capture some updated dots. But I do want to just kind of ground in, there's a lot of language that is used when we talk about expanded learning. Is it after school? Is it out of school time? So on the next slide, this is kind of the framing that CAN has been using to help people understand how all the pieces fit together. So out of school time is this larger umbrella. It is distinct from extracurricular activities. You can see kind of how that is defined on the slide. And in California, expanded learning programs are a specific subset of OST. So you can see the large OST umbrella, and then in green, that's our expanded learning programs, which are OST programs that receive funding administered by the California Department of Education Expanded Learning Division. We call them EXLD for short. They also have a very specific legal definition. So that outlines on the next slide when expanded learning happens, what it looks like, and how it happens. And so there is California Education Code. You can go and read that, but it's broken down into kind of defining expanded learning in the specific way, which you can see is still very broad. So it is a specific type of OST program in California, but it still leaves the door open for a lot of flexibility to meet our students and communities where they're at. And to do that, Tiffany, we
Right.
have to ground in quality.
And I think that we always try to tell this part of the story in this sequence, because even when we first started with federal 21st century dollars, and keeping in mind there was before and after school learning in safe neighborhoods program that was a funded piece, there was then ACES, and the intent has always been to create these very safe and innovative spaces where young people can be. And even with that, the conversation of quality always happens next, right? And so we want to make sure that people understand initially even with ELO-P, people were 100% about, okay, we just need to get programs started, right? We needed to open them up. We needed to get hopefully qualified and caring adults in front of them. And now people are exploring the conversation, but what does a high quality program experience actually look and feel like? And so these are reminders, right? We have the quality standards. They are what holds and grounds all expanded learning programs in the state. And be mindful, so if you haven't looked at them, they align 100% with your program plans for both ACES and ELO-P and 21st century. So they should look really familiar. And on the next slide, this is how we always try to help people anchor in what the standards look and feel like. And that's why if you look at the document, we consider them like the standards in action, because they aren't meant to be prescriptive. They're meant to show you these are all the considerations that should happen. So you have your point of service standards, which are where we actually touch children. They are creating safe and supportive environments. Learning should be active and engaged. It should focus and anchor in skill building. Youth voice and leadership, which is voice, choice, and agency, should be critical components of the program. It should focus on healthy choices and behaviors, and that's everything from harm reduction to good eating habits and access to like healthy foods, right? And also diversity, access, and equity, and understanding that these were cultivated by the field in 2014 and will release second go round and then really affirmed in 2014. And understanding now that we don't even consider diversity, access, and equity a singular standard. It is now a critical component of how you should be looking at every standard. So if you have your point of service where you touch young people, programmatic is how do you create the conditions so that the point of service standards can happen. And our programmatic standards focus on quality staffing, having a clear vision, mission, and purpose. And that's alignment, not just with the program, but with the school day and the larger community. That you have effective and high functioning collaborative partnerships, and keeping in mind that partners are also students and families and community and schools, right? As well as our community based organizations. That there is an emphasis on continuous quality improvement. If you notice in our state, which is different from other states, there is no one singular strategy to evaluate the success of the programs. The intent of our work was to show that every program was actively participating and engaged in a continuous quality improvement strategy, which means that our programs focus on getting better every day. And they can actually document and show what they're doing around that. And the last two are around program management and sustainability. And to say this out loud to folks, if you all have multiple programs, programs funded by multiple streams, ELO-P is one of the best sustainability strategies that we've been able to see because of the level of flexibility, which is why we also say, precursor to later conversations, having one comprehensive program is how you really show and elevate that. Next slide. And so we mentioned this kind of light touch, but the truth is the system of support for expanded learning is not a light touch. It is a really intentional strategy to put support in the regions where it's needed. It is anchored in our county systems. It is supported with the Department of Ed and with Canon ASAP as TA providers and supports. But the reality of having support in your own regions is so that context is never lost in the supports that you get. And so to be really clear, and I think the team has already put the links in there before, but your regional teams and CDE partnerships are the critical first steps to how you get support through our system. And so hats off to all of those amazing folks, because I saw lots of names and faces that are already in the chats. So, and then lastly, and we're going to, you probably see this slide a couple of times, is remember, y'all, that when we initially were funded and expanded learning only showed up in grants on very specific school sites and communities, people assumed that that meant that we were supposed to kind of be acting alone on our campuses. But the truth is, we are part of a larger conversation about how we transform these schools that we are all a part of. And to be really clear, you notice when the superintendent created this graphic that expanded learning wasn't always included in this discussion, but now we are one of the critical parts. And especially for those of you who are also doing community schools, understanding how your expanded learning program should be a critical component. And usually it's where you really get to kind of start your programs from is really important for all of us to kind of really celebrate. Okay, so those are the basics. Are there any kind of questions from the group about what you're thinking so far? Like, is any of this new to you? I sure hope not. But if it is, do we have any questions?
I have not seen anything come into the chat. Now's the time. Like we said, this chat is meant to be really interactive. We'll drop a lot of content in, but if you all have questions, ideas you want to elevate, please do use the chat. And this might just be a refresher for folks, so. And thank you. Thanks,
Yeah.
Sherilyn. Sherilyn's good so far, so.
All right.
Let's keep going. Alrighty. Expanded learning funding. So now we're gonna get a little bit more into the weeds of like actual expanded learning funding, because ELO-P might be what you are familiar with, but it is not the only expanded learning funding options out there. So, Tiffany, you wanna
Yep.
kick us off?
So, and one thing that we want to say, you guys, when you get the slide deck, Heather and I put a lot of slides in here. We're not going to cover all of them, but we wanted to anchor in a few so you actually have some resource to look back on. So, our funding includes state grants via after-school education and safety programs, that's ACES. The state apportionment via Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, that's ELO-P. So some of you that never had funding before and you received funding in the last few years, that's ELO-P. There are federal grants via the 21st Century Community Learning Centers elementary, middle, and after school and enrichment for teens programs, which is assets which support some of our older youth work. ACES 21st Century and ELO-P should be leveraged to offer a single comprehensive expanded learning program. Now, what's been really interesting for folks is the majority of programs, because ACES was a larger funding stream, may have only had ACES funding, but there are some 21st century programs that have for decades had ACES and 21st century. So they've been running a more comprehensive program experience. And when we say that, what that means is the student experience feels like there's one program that has options, but how you have to document and support and show that is it's the back of the house work. That's how we think about it. So that's the work that happens with your your teams and departments. It may be how you document how staff is paid, right? Or which activities are funded through what. But the student and youth experience should be that there's just one opportunity that has lots of different things that they can actually participate and engage in. So this next slide, it looks really busy, but when you have it on your own screen, you can see that we wanted to really show that expanded learning isn't a new thing in the state, right? If you look, this says back in 1990, right, was when we started having the discussions around what in the 90s, when we were going to really start looking at what happened. 94, 21st century was created, and then the total federal funding started to grow between the mid 90s to 2000. And California has always been a really strong proponent and use of how 21st century dollars were intended. There were lots of really strong community-based partnerships. So if you look at some of our oldest standing programs, they are anchored in community-based relationships with schools and families in some of our most under-resourced communities throughout the state. We also wanted to be able to show how different grants came into being and to be mindful as we move forward. And what we anchored in is ACES 21st Century, and those assets programs, those are grants, which means that funding is explicitly tied to a specific school community. Whereas, and this is the difference, ELO-P is an apportionment that goes to our districts, and the districts then determine how to ensure that the targeted population has access to the services and supports. So we just want to be clear that you understand that this is not new funding. It's not a new conversation or dialogue, but the expansiveness of it has grown significantly with the ELO-P announcement in 2021. Okay, next one. So, and with that conversation in 2021, and it's funny, I just said this yesterday in the before and after school committee meeting, is everyone would love to believe that the EXLD, the department, folks that can, our regional teams, like we all said, we need to get ELO-P, and we were rewarded with that. The truth is that was a decision that was made in the governor's office. And honestly, and this is a Tiffany opinion, folks, we think one of the strongest motivators for that was coming out of COVID, families needed more support to get back to work. And expanded learning, if you think about how ELO-P is framed, it allowed us to now serve younger students with TK, right? It was really focused on our younger students, which meant that families have more opportunity to go back to work, and also think about the dollars that were freed for families in this state, because now childcare isn't as large of an issue. So we have to look at, it's not only what it can do for students in our programs, but it's what opportunities it also opened up for our families and our larger community. Now, it's also an ongoing funding stream. You can go to the next slide, Melissa. And that when you are thinking about how you want to leverage your ACES, your 21st century, your ELO-P funding, that it is also still should be considered one single comprehensive program. The intent is to offer all students accessing expanded learning programs, but prioritizing our unduplicated students. And for those, in case you're ever in doubt, Unduplicated pupils, a pupil enrolled in a school district or a charter who's classified as an English learner in some cases, has access to free and reduced price meals. So that's our FRPM eligibility, and is a foster youth. And keeping in mind, this is ELO-P specific. There are other priorities that districts can lay over, as well as if you are leveraging other funding streams that are outside of expanded learning. So be mindful when you are doing comprehensive programming and you are supporting that with additional funding, that you consider who's the population, and or if you are 75% or above, you're making it accessible to all. So things to consider as you kind of keep planning. Heather?
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into some of the things Tiffany already elevated. And so the first thing I kind of want to elevate is this funding and the scope of the funding. So you can see on the left side, ACES in 21st century for this fiscal year, approximately 900 million, and ELO-P 4 billion. And as of the current proposed budget for the incoming year, it could be increased up to almost 4.4 billion, or over 4.4 billion, excuse me. Given what's going on at the federal level and our current budget, not sure if we'll hit that, but that is the current proposal. And when ELO-P was announced, it was announced that $5 billion would be total funding. And so that's kind of the gap at the top, the expectation that we would get to $5 billion overall. These all three funding sources ongoing. That's really important to elevate. A lot of people for a while were confusing ELOG with ELO-P. People are like, I wrote my ELO-P program plan, and we're like, nope, that's an ELOG plan. Those are two different funding sources. So again, these are ongoing funding sources. And when you hear ELO-P, kind of people talk about ELO-P interchangeably with expanded learning as if it is the funding source. Part of that is because you can see the scope of ELO-P is massive, but we do not want to forget ACES in 21st century. That is not a small amount of funding. That is still a lot more funding than other states have. As well. So it funds a lot of our programs. It funds a lot of our middle school and our high school programs. So please don't forget about ACES in 21st century. They're very important to leverage. On the next slide is just another way of looking at these funding sources. And so I'm not going to read all of this, but I do want to elevate, right? You can see the grades that programs are intended to serve. There's, of course, asterisks to everything. Most importantly, with ELO-P, formula-based apportionments, we've been talking about that, intended to serve TK through 6. However, once you meet your minimum offer and access requirements, you can offer programming to students in other grades. So ELO-P has been leveraged to support students in middle school and high school. That is completely okay. Definitely encouraged if your district has the flexibility and the funds to do that, especially if you are looking at how you leverage ACES with 21st century and ELO-P collectively, if you are fortunate to have all of those funding sources in your district. This also elevates, right, site-based awards, school-based awards versus LEA-based awards. So again, just elevating. ELO-P is an apportionment that goes to your district, that the district then identifies sites, whereas ACES and 21st century, including assets, which is our high school program, are competitive applications, and those are like school site-based awards. But they can all work together if you put in the effort. And then because ELO-P is our newer program and its apportionment, I just wanted to elevate this piece around tiers and rates. This can be a little bit confusing, but there are 2 tiers, 2 rates within ELO-P, and it's based off of unduplicated pupil percentage. Currently, the cutoff is 75%, and so that dictates tier 1 and tier 2. there's a lot of information on the slide about how those things are calculated, how you have to provide different offer and access to students based off of your tier. I'm not going to read all of that. Again, hopefully for many of you, this is not new. If it is new and you want to talk through this, we're happy to follow up on this. But I do want to note tier 2 rate fluctuates because we have a set budget amount. And so when rate 1 is set, calculate how many districts are in that tier. That goes out to those districts, and then it's identified how much funding is left and how that needs to be split up with the remaining LEAs or districts. And so it is possible, and it has happened, that rate 2 fluctuates from year to year. And in 23-24, 24-25, we did see a decrease, and that was primarily the result of a statewide increase in classroom ADA for grades TK through K6. A lot of that is because like we're increasing TK, and so there's more TK students and just more students showing up. So that will impact that rate. There's a lot of conversation about this. We know a rate that's moving is hard to plan around. There's a lot of advocacy to discuss, like, what can we do to stabilize tier 2. Some of the legislation that went through in the last budget cycle identified that funding, and this is a note that's in there, but unspent funds from fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23 would be used to increase rate 2 this year. So CDE is working on like figuring all that out. What were the unspent funds? What could that rate be? So we are expecting updates from CDE in the near future to let tier 2 districts know what their revised rate would be. And it'll be reflected in June 2025. And if you're like tracking, like that's the end of the fiscal year, yes, that is true. And you have your liquidation date is June 30th, 2026. So you will have that extra time to spend those additional funds. So apportionments just function differently than grants. And so we know when we talk about on the front end students experiencing a comprehensive program, on the back end, you've got to navigate a lot of different financial and compliance issues to track those funding separately, understand where the funding's coming from, understanding how that funding is structured. So we know it's not easy. However, we want to do our best to ensure still, regardless of all these slides that you're seeing, your students experience the comprehensive experience. So I think, Tiffany, anything you want to say on this slide? And there's a lot moving around this right now, so I know this is like a hot
Right. And I think so the EXLD team is literally working on this now, and also being mindful, right, that the other part about, you know, the wonderful world of apportionments and funding that aligns with the governor's budget is that it all still depends on what is actually signed in the budget. And so just having people understand that there's a lot of moving parts, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later, but just to be really, really clear that the intent is to try to work to a more stable rate for tier 2, as well as, and it's not on here, also looking at the intentional conversations that are having around our rural programs and that $50,000 and trying to get that elevated as well. So we don't want to make it seem as if all of these things are fixed and they are the best solution, but we want people to know that they are explorations that are happening, and our EXLD team, Michael specifically, is doing a lot of work with Ledge on providing them more clarity on what is the like real lived experience of folks with these fundings and these different strategies. So we just want to say that out loud into the space, that we know it's not perfect, but it is something that we're consistently trying to address and get it to where at least it's stabilized in the dialogue.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Yeah.
And just know, I know there is a lot of like in the weeds questions coming into the chat. Much appreciation to our SSEL members who've been responding to the different questions that are coming up. So thank you, especially our CDE team, for the more technical details. And yeah, now we have a bit of a reflection for the group. And I know a lot of the questions are in the weeds. We're going to try to reframe you to a broader reflection point, not to say your in the weeds questions aren't valid, but we want to balance both the like in the weeds details and this bigger picture.
Yeah. And so here's what we want you to think about, right? Like one of the things that we've noticed with the addition of ELO-P, which means that the district has to be intentional about how they are thinking about expanded learning. What we're wondering is if you now know the different ways that expanded learning programs have been funding historically, plus how they're funding right now, what would it mean if your school community really intentionally thought about expanded learning as one of its real critical and integral strategies on how we meet young people where they are? How would your districts and your programs feel if expanded learning was included in the LCAP? In some places, it is, you all, and it's a really, really good thing. Other places, it hasn't gotten there yet. We haven't evolved to that because the work is really new. We're asking questions like when you're thinking about at the site level, your site's SIPSA, your site plan, how has your expanded learning program been included in that conversation about meeting the needs of students and being mindful? This does not mean only academic needs. We're saying, how has the expansiveness of what your expanded learning programs can offer support the overall learning and school experience of students? So we want you to think about that. And with that, drop some stuff in the chat. What's coming up for folks?
All right, I'm seeing Jessica asking if we could say more about what it means for EXL to be in the LCAP. And
We're going to talk a little bit about just in general. Yeah, well, we're going to talk more about local control. So I guess a way to think about it is we have, I will give you a really good example. Tiffany is at a district right now. And part of the conversation that we're having is when you look at the actual goals of the LCAP for your district, and it starts to speak to like, this is the success that we want students to have. These are the things that we want to focus on. When you think of expanded learning, more of a strategy and not just a program or activity, you can start to see how it could be leveraged. When we say things like, expanded learning can be used to support attendance recovery. Well, how could that really support us? Well, if attendance is one of our larger kind of goals that we're trying to address, and what we say is that, well, what we're going to do in our expanded learning program is we have a certificated staff person that leads this activity 3 to 4 times a week. We alternate several students through that throughout the course of that, and they're able to bank a certain amount of hours that can be applied through attendance recovery. Because being mindful, your expanded learning programs support some of our most under-resourced students who have a lot of like specific unduplicated pupil population categories in which they may fit. So we want to be mindful that when we're thinking about supporting our foster youth and creating spaces where they feel welcomed and appreciated, but it also means, are we ensuring that when we have food bank and clothing banks, that they are part of that discussion, not as an aside, but as an intentional strategy that supports them? When we are doing health related supports for some of our students, and we're talking about, remember, free and reduced lunch ensures that we are saying that students get access to healthy meals. It's also ensuring that in our expanded learning program, we do family nights where there's about healthy cooking and eating. Those are explicit strategies that can be captured and documented not only at the district level, but also on a site specific level to show how, because the one thing about expanded learning, and this is what I say to any school, is your expanded learning program can be how you wish your school would operate. It has some structure, but it also has the flexibility of you being able to partner with people that actually live and work in the community, to have staff that looks like the students and experience that on a real space. We also are mindful of when our programs can support efforts that the school can be struggling with. We work with a district, with some schools in Newport Mesa that identified a kindergarten reading strategy that they're only doing for 10 minutes a day, but the TK and K teachers are noticing a significant um, advancement in the students that are in the program and participating in that one activity every day, right? So it's how are we intentional about how we're not only designing and implementing our programs, but connecting that to the larger strategies that our school districts are trying to explore and put in place for our students. So all that. I hope that helped, and y'all just let me go on a rant, and we only have 20 minutes.
And I think we're gonna have, so a lot of people were dropping stuff in while you were chatting, so I think that helped get people going. I do see comments about people being included in the LCAP, but like maybe it could be more intentional. Definitely some like people thinking about, oh, how can we integrate this into the SIPSA? So I think great prompts to get folks thinking, and noting that we're gonna have a field highlight at the end of this, and Jennifer's really fantastic, and we heard her chatting on an actual office hour about like all the amazing things she's doing, so she will also give like a very real tangible example of how some of this work is happening. um and so I'm going to move us along because we're going to try to cover a few more things, and then see how much time we have for questions at the end, and then make sure we have enough time for our highlight and our breakout room. So, education funding. We are definitely not going to talk through all of these slides. Most of these slides are a resource and a reference point for you for later. But on the first thing I want to talk about is just high level, acknowledging the California funding context is really complicated. Um, However, the California Way, as it's dubbed by some for funding schools, is intended to be grounded in equity strategies to provide resources for students who live in our under-resourced communities. For the past 2 decades, folks in California have been working to unravel the knot of Prop 13, which you probably have heard referenced many times, but that is funding our schools with property taxes, and created a really rough structure for a long time in terms of our schools receiving enough funding. And so now the state blends state and local tax dollars as well as other funding, and then sends these out to schools based on attendance, in a yearly apportionment, which is received in stages throughout the year, and that's tied to some priorities. It's supplemented. We did not completely get rid of categorical funds; they just shrunk significantly. But this like base funding is still supplemented by categorical funds, focusing on specific populations, additional deliverables, and unintended outcomes. So kind of keep that in mind. California is a complex state. There are complex issues. Our funding for education is going to be complex, but LCFF, local control funding formula, was really intended to help streamline and address some issues of equity. Is it perfect? No. But is it a long way from where we started? Yes. So 36, this next slide, I'm looking at my notes, it's slide 36. We're not going to talk about this. We want to show you this. Our wonderful colleague, Malia from ASAP Connect, was trying to show in one image, like, how does California school funding work? This is a lot of text. It's a lot of things. There's a lot moving, so you'll have access to look at this in more detail. But we just wanted to graphically elevate like the complexity of this funding system. And so if you had ACEs in 21st century, you might not have really been in this world before, because you had a grant and you didn't really need to be in the business of this. Now with ELO-P, we're very much truly embedded in this funding system, and so it is helpful to understand at a high level how it's structured. The next slide, this is a funny little cartoon that's actually helpful, that kind of demonstrated what did funding look like before, how is it structured now with LCFF. This came out at the time LCFF was introduced, to help folks visually kind of see what was going to happen. But just wanting to elevate a few things about LCFF. So that is, and this is on our next slide, how school districts receive funding. So you'll hear local control funding formula, LCFF. If you hear LCAP, that is the plan that is attached to how districts will use their local control funding. Basically, big idea of LCFF, schools should be equipped to serve the needs of the students they are educating. Districts have many higher need students, so they get more money from the state budget to serve those students. And then the next slide, this just kind of highlights how districts are funding, so how property taxes and state taxes work. If you've ever heard reference to a basic aid district, their property taxes more than cover like what their level, their LCFF funding level, and so they don't necessarily need any additional state taxes, but that's not most of our districts. So most of our districts receive the additional funding from the state to ensure they can reach the LCFF funding level, and that's what helps to build in some of that equity in our funding formula. Tiffany, I think.
Yeah, I think we're not going to spend as much time on these, but we do want you to just kind of understand, right, that there are specific structures and strategies around how funding is determined. And then the one thing that happened when we shifted to this kind of LCAP strategy and LCFF, if you notice, there's also supposed to be training that happens to help parents support this process. And expanded learning folks could be a part of that conversation, you all. So what we really wanted to show with this slide, like go to the next one for me, that all of these different ways that there's different specific categorical funding. There's some funding that you as a member of that school community can give input to how certain dollars are spent, right? And so we wanted people to truly understand that, and especially when we got to the place of having an apportionment, which is part of how the district has to hold the larger funding for that school community, those school communities, plural, that you as part of the expanded learning community have every right to sit and participate in those discussions. Let's go to the apportionment slide, which is next. And part of what we wanted everyone to understand is that ELO-P is an apportionment and there are other ones. And so we wanted people to understand that. So, for example, some of, and I love Michael for just saying this yesterday, that some districts are choosing to not, they're giving back their money, or they may owe some dollars for ELO-P because they did not meet either the number of days or the number of students they were supposed to serve or provide access to. And so what happens is that money is pulled from their apportionment. Now, what people don't understand is if you spent some of that and you don't have enough left, your money can be pulled from other apportionments through their LCAP at that district. So that's why, and I'm saying that specifically so that people understand how apportionments work. It is part of the district's larger structure and strategy, which is why when people initially rolled out their ELO-P programs, some of those folks were explicit about, well, we're going to house those programs where we have the majority of our students and bring other students where we didn't have as many to those larger spaces, right? Because the dollars follow the student. Whereas with our grant-based programs, the dollars are at the site. And so if a student goes to a site that does not have a grant funded program, it wasn't necessarily able to follow them. But with this level of additional kind of funding and support, we're able to think more comprehensively about how do we make sure that the students that need it most have access. Okay, our quick reflection. Thinking about how all this funding is meant to ensure students with the most need receive the services and supports they need, how could your expanded learning program work to support, deepen, and or expand larger student support efforts? And I'm going to give you what I think is a really easy strategy. For those of you in the chat that said that, well, we're not as much a part of the SIPSs, which is the site plan yet, what I'd like for you to do is review your SIPSA from last year, because just so you know, districts are starting to work on them. And looking at that plan, identify how does your existing program help that site meet some of those goals and objectives. I promise you there will be some overlap. So we want you all to take a couple of seconds, look at the question, pop some things in the chat. And how much time do we have? 10 minutes?
We've got 10 minutes.
Okay.
You guys, the chat is disabled, just FYI.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. I will check on that. People,
Are there things in the notes doc?
the chat is just as an FYI, our chat settings for various reasons are set so you're not able to download or copy, but folks should be able to open links or engage in conversation. And if you can't,
The chat was working, but now it's disabled.
okay, we'll see what we can do. I don't think we changed anything, so it might be a Zoom issue, but our lovely folks will try to work behind the scenes to get that fixed, and apologies, y'all. So silently reflect on this question, and hopefully it comes back up and you all can drop all your wisdom into the chat when it's back live. So apologies, and we will still be having breakout rooms at the end. So hopefully if you all have questions or things you want to chat about, we can do that. Yay,
It should work now.
Thanks, Leslie.
It's live? Okay.
I think that was me, you guys. I pushed a button I wasn't supposed to push.
It's okay.
No worries. All right, we're all good. We're back up and running. So now is a great opportunity to drop that wisdom into the chat, thinking about this question, and we're gonna just move along so we can get through our last bit and then turn it over to our field spotlight. So just talking about expanded learning in the larger funding context. So we have been talking about this already, but just kind of reiterating some stuff. And so if we go down a couple slides, we're going to pull this image back up. And just...
Yeah, and I know we're going to go. Hold on one second. So, Pedro, here's the thing that we'd like to say, and I think this is where things got really confused. When people originally thought about their ACES programming, what they thought it meant was that students had to be in the program every day, all day, for them to count as being in the ACES program. That is not accurate. What happens in an ACES program is, yes, you should have a full and robust offering for students that would need to be there every day, all day, because dosage is important when they have a lot of need. That is part of what the program offerings could be. But if students only wanted to come to the enrichment activity because they have other commitments, if students only needed to come on Tuesdays and Thursdays because the families need that level of support, that is how the diversity of programming can be offered. And noting that every child that comes for ELO-P in a comprehensive program counts for your ACES attendance. So we want you to think about, yes, should you have a more robust program offering for students that need more? Yes. But if a family only needs certain activities or is in alignment with certain enrichment components, then that is also what the family needs, and we should be meeting that need as well. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about that in the chat in the breakout rooms later. So I just wanted to say that because I saw that.
Thanks, Tiffany. And so just going through the next few slides really quickly in 5 to 6 minutes. And this is just a callback. We shared this already. Just keep reinforcing expanded learning is part of these comprehensive supports, and these other supports can be embedded into expanded learning or leveraged as well. And then on the next slide, any of you all who have heard us talking about whole child family health and wellness have likely seen some version of this graphic, right? Multiple funding sources, one cohesive approach. Some people call it the no wrong door approach, but just our students and our families having access, they should be at the center, their wellness at the center, and we figure out how to make all these resources work to support them, not them having to piece together a system to support them. And then we just have a few, this is stuff we're definitely not going to go into the weeds about. And some of this is from our ELO-P Academy that Tiffany and Malia facilitated a year ago. And so if you want to go deep into the weeds of this, I'd highly recommend checking out that recording from last year. But Tiffany, what do you want to say today about braiding and blending funds?
Let's go. I think here's the important part. Go to the next slide. So here's how we want folks to think about something is part of what makes people nervous about when we talk about blending and braiding funding is realistically because the tracking of what the funding is used for is usually important for reporting purposes, right? So people are always like, oh, I just want to be able to like keep it clean. I want to have like our ACES program is over here and it funds these things and these students. And the truth is, you all, we are not saying that it's easy. But what we are saying is that for the student experience to be seamless, it's usually necessary. And it allows you to have a different type of programmatic experience. One of the best examples, and I'm going to say it now and I was supposed to wait and say it later, of where I've seen blended funding work well is it is creating full-time site coordinators and other supportive positions for the expanded learning programs, right? Because part of their salary is paid for by ACES, part of their salary is paid for by ELO-P. We even have some school communities where part of their salary is paid by the community schools work because the expanded learning program is a part of that larger community school effort. Now, how would you document that timing in the back? It could be really clear. They could spend 1 to 2 hours a week supporting the community schools work and by ensuring that students have access to the resources through the community schools model. It could be that they're also the person that documents and does the ACES tracking and the ACES program planning, right? So being mindful that, yes, it takes a little extra effort. True. I won't say that it won't, and we won't try to minimize that. But what we're saying is when you look at the student experience, what you are saying is how do we leverage all of the funding to give students the services, the resources, and the supports that they need access to? And being mindful that when we talk about it, we're really, right now, we've only really been talking about your ACES, your 21st century, your assets kind of funding and ELO-P, but there's so many other dollars that are used right now on our school sites that could be leveraged. You could have a full nutrition supplemental piece, a full arts program that is an additional programmatic option that's leveraged in your expanded learning program. And then it also does assemblies during the school day, right? So there's ways for you to think just a little differently, a little broader about how you could really do some interesting work with the concept of braiding and blending funding. Let's go all the way down to Dr. Meyer also created, it's because she's brilliant, y'all. An LCAP, LCFF kind of ELO-P crosswalk.
It's back a couple, Melissa. You might have to refresh the deck. Sorry.
Well, we'll make sure that it's in the deck so that you have it. But she created some really specific language for people to think about the similarity of the plans, that they needed to be board approved so you could ensure that there's alignment there, that they needed to be posted on your websites. But it really is a way to show that the actual district is thinking about your expanded learning program as a component to their larger strategy for supporting the needs of kids and families. All right. I think that that's it, and it's 11:15. Anything you want to add, Heather, before we like really have y'all hear somebody really brilliant and we can stop talking?
I think that's it. We can talk about like do this, but it's actually better to hear from somebody that is doing it. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to introduce our spotlight.
Thank you. Before I introduce our spotlight, just want to take a moment to thank Heather Williams and Tiffany Gibson from the California After School Network for facilitating a really rich conversation and facilitating all the wonderful slides that had these super helpful, in my opinion, the tables that kind of just like laid all the content out, make it a little more digestible. And so thank you both for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us this morning. And so in a moment, we will be bringing Jennifer Davis on the screen, who is our Field Spotlight. And so Field Spotlights, as I mentioned earlier, is an opportunity to hear from leaders throughout the state who have a promising practice, a resource, an idea, a strategy, basically anything that is in action that is helping expand opportunities for students and youth in their communities. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Davis, who's the Administrator of Expanded Learning in the Fairfax School District from Bakersfield, Region 8. And so I'll go ahead and pass it off to you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I want to say, Tiffany and Heather, we didn't meet before this, but I feel like we are 100% on the same page. So thank you for that. So I am from Bakersfield, California, which is in Kern County. Our district is considered medium small. We have three elementaries, one junior high, and a Site 5 that's on the way. We serve 2,700 students. We have a SED of 2,000, about 2,600 students with disabilities at 314. Our LTELs are at 136 and our ELs are at 801. And one of the great things is we have an attendance rate of 97.45, which is great. And that comes from some of the work that we're doing with attendance recovery. So if we can, do I have permission to go on, or are you going to click me on Melissa? Perfect. Okay. So, kind of step one is one of the things that I feel like is really important as you're starting out, or maybe you're somebody who has done this before. I want to preface with that we have ACES and 21st century funding, And ELO-P has been a game changer for us. And we do a lot of that braiding that's been talked about. So I think in order to make your program work is really understanding the importance of the program, which Tiffany and Heather went over, but getting your district administration involved, your site administration involved, and getting a seat at the table. I'm fortunate enough where we have really impacted our district so much that we are considered, and we're put on our district website as pretty much being its own school. Um, and we treat our program like it's a school. So we treat it in the same way. Our staffing is the same, as far as rules and safety and how we conduct ourselves. Our protocols are the same as far as discipline. Our goals are aligned with the school day priorities. And this is where you really get that buy-in from site administration. So our sites do PBIS and Character Strong. And those are really important components for our students for their SEL experience. So we continue those same practices in after school. So we do PBIS after school. We do Character Strong in after school. We align it with the same practices. So if this month is empathy during the regular day, we're doing empathy in after school. So we're really trying to blur the lines for the kids and for the families where they see it as one long school day. But we get to be the cherry on top of that school day. We're involved in our SST process. So I have a couple of program specialists, much to the disappointment of some of our site principals. I picked up two of our brightest teachers that are wanting to go into administration, put them in as program specialists, and they're the experts on all things curriculum. They're connecting with the day, and so they're in on SSTs. So if we have students that have SSTs, my program specialist and myself go in those meetings, and we try to align ourselves with whatever supports that are happening during the day. And that really gets the family involved because they know that their child is being supported from the time they get to school till the time they get picked up. And that's good for that kid because we know that kids thrive on structure. And so we really try to be in on that. We sit on school council meetings, and I put be nosy. Get in anywhere you can get in the door and get your program where it benefits kids, get in there. Be a part of it. Put somebody on your team on it. My site leads now participate in school site council where it was just me. And they were actually invited to be part of it. Regular communication with principals and district leads. Like I said, I have a seat at the table. The principals put out a newsletter every month. I put out a newsletter every month. The principals put out a weekly bulletin. I put out a weekly bulletin to my staff. We have our own website. We have our own social media. We have our own, and we email. Anytime we have a situation with a kid, we include the teacher, the principal, and whatever supports they have in the office. So we really have started to integrate ourselves into the school day. And we celebrate our shared student success stories. We know that there are times when our students that come to after school do not have a successful time during the instructional day, but they have success in after school. And we create opportunities for them to have success in after school because we know that they're not feeling it during the day. That eventually turns into a platform where they go back to the regular day and start seeing some success there because that confidence has grown. So when those things happen, we make sure to share those with the teacher. If a student's doing really well and maybe they are taking on a leadership position after school, we make sure to let the principal know and the teacher, because what they will do and come in and say, hey, I heard you were a leader in the after school clubs yesterday. That's great. And that kid knows that everybody knows what they're up to. Everybody is celebrating their success. And so we found that that's worked really well. Melissa, if we can go on to our next. Community partnerships. This is a great place to be. So we have partnered with a couple of our local universities and colleges. Just so happened to meet someone that was teaching classes at Cal State Bakersfield. They were teaching credentialing classes. And I said, I know that they're student teaching, but do you guys do anything like that? She's like, no, we're not doing student teaching yet, but we are practicing assessments. So we ended up working something out where her classes were taught on site at our school after school. And the need for that class was to really work with English language learners. So what would happen is those classes then of future teachers would come in and partner with a student after school twice a week because they meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they would read to them. And then they would be able to do assessments for their own work. But really, the main time that was spent was just sitting side by side and having them read and getting that teacher practice working with kids and responding and connecting with kids, because we know that teachers that are coming in, they get all this experience in the pedagogy, but they don't ever really get to put it in practice until they get to student teaching. So we found that that's really been beneficial. That's created a win-win for both of us. We have a partnership with CSUB math department. They come every summer. They bring math teachers in that are training for math, and they run these really cool STEM 2 weeks of STEM. And it's a grant that CSUB applied for, and they needed somebody, and they knew their teacher was with us. So then they sent their future teachers out, and they bring the really cool stuff because it's a university. So they have access to a lot more than we do. Also, service learning, high school and career exposure opportunities. I really encourage you to partner with your local high schools. We are fortunate enough to have one next door, so it works out really well with us. We become great partners with them. And so again, they got a grant and they asked us to be part of it. We jumped on it. It's brought career technical education grant, and then that opened up other opportunities for larger partnerships within the district. We partner with our local churches and businesses. We know that businesses need to be invested in schools, and schools need to be invested in businesses, and we need to work together as a community. We are a small community, so we've made some really good connections with a couple of our local churches. We have a church that comes out the first day of summer, and as drive-through parents are going through drive-through, they hand out coffee and donuts and just say have a great day. We also are partnered with a church that has a special education service that they do when it's like Sunday school, but it's with special education students. So their person has volunteered for summer to bring our special ed students over and run like centers for them, and they have indoor access. They have a gym, and it's frying in Bakersfield in summer, so we need as much AC as we can get. So they're providing they're bringing in volunteers and creating centers for our special ed students to go over. They're going to do a paint night day for some of our kids. And then we just partnered with another another church that's planning on supporting us, possibly doing some food assistance and clothing assistance, things like that. We're starting the virtual enterprise. Sports and theater are some things that are taking place at the high school. So we look at what are our kids going to need as freshmen coming in, because we want our students to go into high school. That bridge is really tough. So we want our kids, and we know that kids that don't have access, they're not going in and doing club sports. They're not traveling. They're not having access, we know, as what the kids on the other side are doing. So we try to bring those in ahead of time. So then when our kids get to high school, they say, oh my gosh, I know how to do that. I'm going to join that club. So it's not as intimidating. Part of our grants with the school next door is we send our kids to their campus starting in their incoming 6th grade year, and they do classes with their teachers as part of their career technical classes. So they go in, and by the time they've been to high school, if they come with us every summer, they've done three summers at the high school, and the teachers know them. So when our kids go in, they're ready for leadership. They're the ones that come in first day of school at freshman and are telling everybody else kind of, this is how you use that machine. They know how to do all of those things. We partner with our Kern County Fair, And every year, our students enter projects in the fair. This is something that's totally free. The fair is a big deal in Kern County. And so when our kids go, they run their parents right over to the projects and they get to see their projects and see their ribbons. We've had a couple of students win Best in Show. We had a kid that knew how to crochet, and he just put he was the only one that did crochet, put it in, and he won like $100 prize. So we let them, what are you good at? What do you want to learn how to do? And then we put those in the fair. They get to go see them, and they all get something for it. So those are a couple of community partnerships that we have going on. I'm gonna go to the next one. So I feel like one of the things that's really made us work with others is we call it playing nice. So we position ourselves to networks and vendors and community organizations. We really try to connect ourselves with people in the community and places that we know have service opportunities for them and for our students. So we position ourselves to be in close contact with those types of organizations. And for me and some other people on my staff, we try to get involved in community service ourselves. So I sat on a couple of local organizations with some boards, being on a board. I attend local, it's a leadership academy, and this is not in education. This is in business and different opportunities, but it's a great way to network because these are people that that serve the community. And so they want to know where they can serve, and we want to know how we can get served. So it's a great partnership. It's a win-win. I think for us as well, it's knowing your organization's red tape and your red tapers. So we all know that there's red tape, making sure that you know what that red tape is, and then know who your naysayers are going to be. Fortunately for me, my district, we don't have a lot of naysayers. We have a lot of can-doers. So really kind of where we have evolved is the principals now, things will come to their desk and they'll say, gosh, you know what? I can't do this, but I think my after school person can. And they'll start sending us their way because they know. And I come from a place with principals. I say, what do you need? What is it that you want for your kids? Principals know. They'll say, hey, you know what? I really need this. I'll say, okay, I can't do that, but I can do this. Or what if we partner on this? So we can, we can do this part in after school, but you have to do this part during the regular day. One of the things that's really benefited us with that is, so we have a program after school that's called Achievers. And it is it's a program, like a tutoring program. Kids are selected by students based on whatever their learning need is. So they go in, they do about 8 weeks, and it rotates every 8 weeks. So the teachers use their local assessments to determine they needed more support in there. We needed classrooms, and I needed professional development. So, and we all know how hard it is to get classrooms and after school, right? Because it's their classroom. Lucky for me, our superintendent and our principals say, no, the classrooms belong to the kids. And so we hear it, but it never happens. We get our classrooms. So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to use your classroom, but I'm going to send my after school activity lead into your classroom for the last hour of the day. That's going to be their professional development, because what we wanted from the teachers is to give our staff, my number one thing from staff is classroom development, a classroom management. They always want it as much. Well, we can show them videos, but they need it in real time. So we have put them in the classrooms. We tell them, watch for transitions, watch for how teachers manage classrooms, watch for your squirrely kids, and spend some time in groups building connections with students. So we put them in at that last hour of the day. My after school staff goes in their classroom. They work with the teacher. We also give teachers opportunities to work with all of our really cool stuff. So we had drones sitting on the shelf for the longest time. And we asked, you ask a teacher, hey, we'll let you play with our drones if you show our staff how to manage them. How do we show kids how to put them away and take them out? How do we check them? If you show us the management piece of how to use that, you can use them during the day, and then my staff gets trained for the afternoon. So we've made it a win-win in that situation. And when our after school staff walks in the classroom, it blows the kids' minds because they're like, what are they doing here? They're from after school. So again, we're blurring that transition time for the kids. And my activity leads are getting time to go in and connect with kids in the wild. And so that has really done well for us by taking what it is that students and teachers and administrators need and building on top of that. Go to the next one. Okay, so before we go on to this is a sample of one of our summers. I just wanted to build upon a couple of things that Tiffany and Heather brought up, and it's connecting to those standards. And so one of the things that we do is we hold our weekly meetings, and at the top of our meetings, I list all of the standards. It's at the front of everyone's mind. So when my staff says, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? We're always connecting it to those standards. So whenever we have a meeting, we check off the top, which standards are we addressing during this meeting, so that we know that we have fidelity to what the standards are for after school. And then also, if a kid taking feedback from students, we just had a great one that connected to the regular day. So last Friday was a minimum day, but we're open till 6. So one of my site leads said, hey kids, what do you guys want to do? Like, that's a short day. What do you want to do? And one of the kids said, why don't we have a family picnic? We've never had a family picnic. Well, our school day, they have family picnics once a month. We've never done one in after school. She said, that's a great idea. So she called me. I was like, yeah, let's do it. I went in on Friday. It was packed with parents and they loved it. So making sure that you're taking student feedback. And then also I want to get to, when you're talking about equity and those different fundings, we have 21st century funding. We created equity within those sites that were funded. We had sites that weren't funded. So we took our ELO-P funding, put it to those sites, and made equity within the district. And so just a couple of tidbits to go along with. I know I probably ran over time, but thank you so much for the time to share. And I hope you got at least a nugget of something that will help.
Thank you, Jennifer. We actually had Jennifer shared a really cool video that's embedded into our slide presentation. So when we share that out with everyone, you'll have the opportunity to take a look at one of their summer learning opportunities at a nearby location offsite. So we don't have time, unfortunately, to watch it now, but you can certainly watch it when we share the resources. Thank you, Jennifer, for spotlighting Fairfax School District and Bakersfield and all of the great things that you were doing. I don't know about you all, but I heard, right, like sustainable programming, the impact of community partnerships, the value in youth voice and designing what they want to do. Also, the partnerships with the school day, the school administrators, the district administration, and also leaning into what is it that the workforce needs, right? Like if it's building their capacity, building their skills, and then also I think I heard about workforce opportunities, right, for higher ed, and how those relationships can be nurtured in the out of school time programs and then evolve from there. So thank you, Jennifer, again. And Jennifer's contact info is shared in the slides. So folks have questions or you want to learn a little bit more, Jennifer will also be in one of our breakout rooms just to share maybe if there's some questions that you might have on how they're operating something within their community, you can certainly jump into that breakout room. So I'm going to go ahead and move us on. Thank you again, Jennifer. So I know we shared it before. Heather and Tiffany mentioned earlier in their presentation, but again, want to share the system of support for expanded learning. You can scan the QR code here, or it is also, the link is also in our learning guide, I think on page 3, that has a list of resources specifically from the California Department of Ed, and it includes our contact information for the system of support for expanded learning. This is our feedback form. And so if you are attending, if today is the only workshop that you're attending, you're welcome to scan the QR code. We'll also drop a link in the chat that you can click on to complete the feedback form. If you are planning to attend workshops tomorrow and then the workshops that we continue throughout next week, you can wait to fill out this feedback form and give us your feedback all at once. But we certainly value feedback. We really value continuous quality improvement and how we can enhance our learning opportunities for the field. And so it should take maybe 5 to 7 minutes if you have the time to give us your feedback. All right, so we are going to jump into breakout rooms now. In a moment, I will open up the rooms, and you can see here we have a list of different topics. Again, they will be loosely facilitated. It's really a place for our participants to build community with each other, ask questions. We will have a support person in there just to kind of help maybe perhaps guide, you know, the conversation. But you can join room 1, which if you want to dive a little deeper with Jennifer Davis and Fairfax School District and learn a little bit more of the things that they're doing in their community. If you'd like to connect with Heather and Tiffany and dive a little bit deeper on their presentation. We also have additional rooms that will focus on leveraging funding to support specific student populations. Again, this is not an extension of a presentation. Rather, it's an open space to learn from each other and ask questions. We also have leveraging funding in rural small districts and communities. So if that's of interest to you, you can join room 4. We'll also have another breakout room in room 5 on leveraging funding to advance health and wellness initiatives. And so if that's something that you'd be interested in, you can join our team in there. And then finally in room 6, it will be focusing on building a comprehensive expanded learning experience. So really thinking about that one comprehensive program, how funding streams are braided to offer one comprehensive program. So in a moment, I will open those. Our Zoom will end in the breakout room, so we will not be joining the large space. And so before I open up, I just want to say one more time, deep gratitude to our presenters today, Heather Williams, Tiffany Gibson, and Jennifer Davis. And also shout out to Leslie Lugo for opening the space and leading us in a grounding to kind of get us settled for today. If folks are unfamiliar with how to join a breakout room, you can simply, when I open them, you'll see this toolbar open up at the bottom. You can click on breakout rooms, and it's a choose your own adventure. You select the room that you would like to go to. Once you click on breakout rooms, rooms will populate in a window like this. If you have a bunch of windows open on your screen, it might be kind of hard to navigate that. So just flagging, you might need to minimize your windows to see that. And then you can hover over which room you would like to join. And this little box will pop up where you can click yes to join a breakout room. It may take a few moments just because we're all trying to get into a breakout room. So we appreciate your patience. If that doesn't work for you, you can also rename yourself using the top in the top right corner. You can click on the 3 dots to rename yourself and put what room you would like to go in. And our team will do our best to move you into that breakout room. And if that doesn't work for you, you can just hang out and you can drop in the chat if you want to get to a room, and our team will help get you to that room as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go back. leave this slide up so you can see what room. And I'm opening rooms now. Again, our Zoom will end at 12 p.m. and I'll send a 2-minute warning. Thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you tomorrow. And breakout rooms are open. You can start self-selecting which breakout room you would like to attend. And I'm going to stop sharing for now and help folks get into a breakout.